We read to you from the Scriptures, first from the Psalms. People in all generations, regardless of their walk in life, find that they have to deal with the anxieties of life. And the psalmist from way back was like any of us, looking at the anxieties and seeking a good, strong inner presence that would give him that strength to deal with his anxieties. And so the words of the psalmist are commended to us today. It is my version of Psalm 27. The headlines in the papers every day can arouse a lot of anxiety, even in the safety of our own home. One noise at night can make my heart jump, and I start believing the house could be surrounded by who knows what coming to get me. And then I know that I have succumbed to my own scattered anxiety, when what I need to do is refocus on what is good and beautiful in life. So I focus on the presence of a loving, caring God who raises me out of my stress and helps me stand tall again in spite of the things that would make me anxious. Deep inside me, I hear my voice saying to me, "Come on, take hold of that good presence." Even then, in my anxiety, I hear myself saying, "Oh God, help me. Do not hide yourself from me. Though mother and father are of no help to me, surely there is a God who will bring me to my moment of strength." So I say to that good presence, "Show me the way." I do not want to be like those who throw themselves on the useless heaps of life. I want to believe in the goodness of life. I am ready to wait for that. Yes, I shall breathe better. I shall gather my courage and my strength. God gives them to me, if only I will wait for God's gift. What a huge difference to our lives if we'd been taught while we were still children how to control our worrying, how to cope with all those overflowing anxieties, how to contain and cushion our social unease. What a difference it would have made if we'd been taught how to compose ourselves better for every public encounter, how to come to terms with the constant testing of our self-worth and our self-competence. What a difference it would have made if we'd been taught how to close off the turbulence of life's troubles and traumas and get on with our life. From the moment we took our first breath, anxiety and anxiousness became our lifelong companions. And the daily challenge was how to live comfortably with those companions that would constantly unsettle us and that would ultimately take control of us, join forces with other conditions that together would threaten to kill us. Anxiety, our multiple anxieties. Just as we begin to coexist with and conquer the anxieties of our childhood, we rushed into adolescence. And just as we began to control those adolescent anxieties, the anxieties of adulthood took over. The anxieties of career, achievement, and parenthood, perhaps, followed by the awareness of a new carriage full of anxieties of the meaning of life in middle age. Anxiety is anxiety, whatever age, but the clothes it wears will be different as we reach and traverse the phases and stages of life. And so it is for those of us who are over 60. Psychologists have been all too ready to call anxiety an illness. This common experience of our everyday life, is it really an illness that requires treatment? Sometimes it does take the form of an illness, particularly as it joins with other conditions, other perhaps physical conditions. And together you find that you are in the world of illness. But along with most of us, we're living with our everyday anxiety, not as an illness, but as something we have to cope with as a way of self-management. So in the interest of avoiding the illness idea, let me take you on this different pathway today. I believe we're 2 or 3 decades behind in our understanding of our everyday anxiety. Isn't that extraordinary? An everyday experience, and we're well behind in our research into anxiety, in our education and management of our anxiety, even in our treatment of anxiety, and certainly in our management of anxiety. So in the world of psychology and psychotherapy, it seems to be more attractive, perhaps, to be claiming expertise in the treatment of anxiety than it is to do the hard yards of understanding that anxiety and finding ways to prevent it doing so much damage as it is able to do. Understandably, no matter who we are, no matter how clever we are, we know that anxiety somehow hits us, and we are more or less its victims. Some people even talk about, I'm an anxious person, as if that's their destiny. So being into that destiny, or like most of us, being its victim, it is likely then to carry us off in many directions without us realizing how much anxiety is the driving force and sometimes even the destructive force of our lives. We all know how anxiety can drive us into relationships that we, with hindsight, might wish we could have avoided. Anxiety can join in the pain and prognosis of illnesses and accidents. It becomes the add-on, if you like. It can cause, it can be concealed, it can complicate, and it can be very costly before we say we'd better get this under control. In my work, there are 4 kinds of anxieties. There is the anxiety of specific concerns. We know about those. There is the generalized anxiety, a life of anxiety. That's the second one. And thirdly, there are then those complex manifestations of anxiety, of what we call anxiety disorders. And fourth, there's what I'm calling today social anxiety. These 4 affect all age groups, but each age group will have its own peculiar manifestation of it. In this address today, I focus on the social anxiety of people over 60. Of course, people who are not yet 60 might say, well, that's us out. But wait a moment, before you switch off, remember that social anxiety can be a relentless difficulty for children of kindergarten age. We see that in my big tent project with the kindergarten field officers. We see that social anxiety can be a major concern for young people 16 to 18 years of age. But social anxiety after 60 has its own peculiarities, and it can bring diffuse problems to our life and to the way we live. So if you are over 60 or over, I hope that what I will say today might be helpful to you as you reflect on the way you manage your anxieties. If you're not yet 60, I hope that what I have to say will go some way to prevent the turbulence that we who are over 60 have experienced. And if you are in the very much younger age groups, then now's the time to upgrade the processes of prevention, of personality integration, so that in the later years you might have better management of your anxieties, better than us who are over 60. Of course, some of you may say, look, we came here today to hear something about religion and faith, and you're going to give us a psychology lecture? Yes. Because you see, religion and faith are about human behavior. Religion and faith are about enhancing human behavior. Religion and faith are about marshalling the best life resources and resilience. Religion and faith are about rearranging our social influences, reintegrating our inner self to better embrace those everyday experiences of social anxiety. And believe this, way back, thousands of years ago, the psalmist wrote his words for us. I read them to you today in Psalm 27. He said there, I want to believe in the goodness of life. Is there anyone here who would not say yes to that? I want to believe in the goodness of life. Now, if you embrace the goodness of life, what anxieties can extinguish it? Or if you like, you could turn to the epistle that we read today. Do not lose heart, it said. Pause and reflect that the source of all goodness and strength comes to you as a strengthening inner presence. Here is the best of religion, joining with the best of psychology, saying your inner self, your inner resources, your inner resilience need to be recognized and constantly renewed so that they will become a vital part in understanding your social anxiety and in your coping with it. So what is our social anxiety? It is probably the biggest challenge we have in living in our social networks, no matter what age. No matter what age we're living at, social anxiety becomes a huge concern. Some say it is the third biggest mental health problem after depression and alcoholism. But I would say that large sections of alcoholism and depression are driven by social anxiety, making social anxiety a huge concern. After 60, it is a generalized worry of loss of confidence, a loss of my place in the world. I once perhaps thought I knew my place. Now I'm losing it. A loss of my social identity, who I am, who I once was, now who am I? And with it often comes a heightened sense of self-criticism and self-evaluation, putting yourself down, saying I'm nobody. There is the anxiety of who you now will be in face of the uncertainties of your future. the anxiety of disillusionment in your social life, your discontent in your social life, and your disgruntlement. Other conditions can quickly join the party, and they can mask your anxiety behind your digestive disorders, behind your irritable bowel syndrome, behind your relationship deterioration and destructiveness, behind your diabetes, your heart problem, your sleep restlessness, your memory anxieties, your body functions. Now, we could say those anxieties are anxieties in themselves, but they very quickly join the social fabric of our lives. Anxieties and apprehensions about our future together. Anxieties hidden behind our hostilities and our hate. All social anxieties. Anxiety about sustaining our relationships, our health, our finances. Anxieties about the meaninglessness of life and the inevitable destiny of our mortality. So what are we going to do? What can we do about these social anxieties? Sunday morning here in church, I'd like you to pause a while, because as you walk from this place, you're going to be back in the midst of this maelstrom of anxiety and how you will cope with these anxieties. Any number of people will give you their advice. You need to develop coping strategies. The psychologists are quick to tell you that. You need better coping strategies. All too often, this good advice runs into difficulties because we don't know how to develop effective coping strategies. Or we find that the coping strategies that we read about in the books don't work. Or the problems that we have grown to such a size that we don't know where to begin. And so we feel we can't do much about it. And we then become the victim of our anxiety and the anxiety within our social fabric. Social anxieties, of course, are often driven by other people, by our relationships, our deteriorated relationships, our damaged relationships, and by our destructiveness in our relationships. And that there can be 4 aspects to these anxieties. Notice this. If it is a social anxiety, if it is social, the anxiety thus is about the presence and the power of other people. Or you might say it's the way we look at other people or the way we operate with other people, but it's about people out there, other people and their power. That's number 1. If it is about an enlarged presence of other people, the enlarged power of other people, it means also the diminished presence of yourself and the diminished power within yourself. So number 2 was to say, see the growing power of the other, see the diminishing power in ourselves. Thirdly, it might mean that the sources of nourishment within ourselves have dried up. There is insufficient feed in from the social fabric or from anywhere. So there's a drying up taking place, number 3. And number 4, it might mean that you're part of a long history or a hidden history of self-criticism, self-negation, self-impoverishment, and self-ineffectiveness. And maybe you don't know how to counter that. So there is a natural tendency to blame people, places, and our plight. And so our corrective procedures may then be focused on other people, on places, on the plight. But if people, place, and plight are too big for the person himself, herself, myself, it may be better to start there with the person. Not with the external strategies, but with the internal personality, the inner person. And it is very salutary, isn't it, that is where the biblical passage pointed us, to the strength of the inner presence, the psalm, the strength of the inner presence, to the refocusing and reintegration of the inner self with a higher presence, to the restoration and strengthening of the damaged self, to the rejuvenation of the worn-out self or the ineffective self. All too often, we settle for being a victim of our overpowering anxieties and we neglect the inner repowering of the inner self. Social anxieties after 60 can be very insidious, can be so comprehensive and very persuasive, such that we say, it's just too much. I can't cope. But imagine changing that way of thinking for a moment. If we can re-strengthen the inner self, we then might be strong to hold back the most powerful anxiety. If we can rejuvenate the good influences within the social fabric, we start to reshape important resources. If we can restore our awareness of our resilience and become reintegrated with that resilience, then our anxieties would no longer be our dominant discourse. Rather than being the submissive victim of our multiple anxieties, we might then start developing a new discourse where our resilience becomes our dominant desire, and also we become aware it is our life's great gift. It is worth noting that in this journal of psychotherapy integration, just December last year, Dr. Justin MacArthur of Canada writes about social anxiety, and he refers to miracle questions. We need a few miracle questions, I think. I think we could benefit from them. It is simply this: imagine the future without your problem. Imagine the future without your anxieties. Just imagine it. Then other therapists joined him, and they wrote, "Miracle questions help us look beyond our narrow confines of our problems so that we can imagine a different reality and a different way of coping and a different solution, a different outcome." That's a miracle. And we need to practice our miracle questions, whereby we re-strengthen the inner self. We rejuvenate your surrounding influences because they can go flat or become ineffective. We need to restore your awareness of your own resilience and start restoking your resilience. And then we need to look again, renew your religion as an intelligent, meaningful resource. Not as something you just do on Sundays or not at all, but something that will reinforce your inner sense of that positive self, accepted and strong. reinforce the courage to place the anxieties out there and the anxieties in yourself in a more positive context. A religion that reinforces the connection with your psychological and spiritual resilience. A religion that reinforces your need to build your safety zones, that give you the space, the safety zone spaces, wherein you can review yourself and see what is required before you take the next step. A religion that reinforces your positive place in the world and develops into a new faith in yourself, in the future. A new faith that is always changing to meet that changing situation in yourself. Social anxieties require social competence. And social competence is affected in large measure by the development of your inner strengths, by your integration of those strengths with good influences, a good inner presence, which will be a healing presence, an enhancing experience. In this, our psychology expands with our awareness of how our faith, our good faith, can nudge us towards something bigger than ourselves. Indeed, a presence that is bigger than ourselves. Would you please stand? Today we say the traditional Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So you've come to this place, and now you'll go from this place. Take with you the blessing of this place. Take with you the blessing of the faith, a new faith. May your God go with you and bless you today and always.